I am Sye Rodriguez, and I am here today to share with you my perspective on a film called That Sugar Film. And I'm just going to say, starting off right away, that I was disappointed in the film, but I wasn't surprisingly disappointed. And I can tell you I went into it with a bias. The bias that I went into it with is that it's going to be a film that's going to be against all sugars. And pretty much that is the point that I got coming out of it. So I had a predetermined mindset when I went into it, but I thought, it's good to see the other side of things. And, you learn things along the way. And I did learn some stuff, um, not a whole lot though. So that sugar film, I wrote some notes down here. The main star is Damon Gameau or Gamo. He's an Australian guy, and he is sets out on a 60-day experiment to test the amount of sugar on himself that the average person eats in the times we live in. And maybe it was from Australia that he was comparing something like 40 teaspoons of sugar a day is the average. Now, we all know, at least most of us think, that sugar, too much sugar is not good for you. And I will attest to that truth that you can overdo it, specifically super refined sugars. And there is a difference in sugars. One of the things that I didn't like about the movie is he didn't really differentiate from sugars that much at all. I mean, he talked about glucose and, as they call it, fructose or fructose, and how sucrose is a combination of those things. But they didn't really differentiate a lot in the sources of the sugars, and that is one of the problems that I had the most with the movie. However, what I'm saying is that I think that most people could agree that too much sugar, especially refined sugar, is not good for you. And I have nothing to argue with that except for the movie is very misleading, and I wouldn't feel like I was being a responsible person if I didn't stand up a little bit for sugar, first of all, and kind of break down a few more facts and some things that were left out. So, one thing I can say is refined sugar of most kinds, when it's really super condensed and refined, it's not in the food anymore, then it's obviously going to have more serious consequences than if it's less refined. And there's multiple levels of refining. But for example, lollipops that are made with fruit juice or sweetened with fruit juice, they still have an effect on my kids that makes them a little bit hyped in a way that maybe is not desirable, and maybe crash a little bit from those types of lollipops. But um, I'm definitely okay with them having them from time to time because I think it's not all that bad to have a little bit of sugar once in a while, even if it's from a source that's not a perfect source. But that source, organic fruit juice sweetened lollipops, is definitely a better source than, say, refined white sugar, which is worse than sugar that's been semi-refined, like sugar that's just dehydrated cane juice, for example, like sucanat, which has all of the nutrients in it. And that's one of the points that I wanted to make is that they're not differentiating the types of nutrition in types of sugar. So, for example, in sucanat, there's lots of iron, there's some magnesium, there's other trace minerals, and um, different types of nutrients that are good for you. So, um, in a certain way, you could say that there are some health benefits to having some sucanat, which is basically dehydrated cane juice. It's a plant, and it has vitamins and minerals in it. So, um, same thing with fruit juice. It obviously is going to have some nutrients in it. Mostly, fruits are known for having vitamin C, but they have minerals and other vitamins as well as antioxidants and things like that as well. So we know this stuff So this is not really my biggest problem with the movie, and I'm going to get to that point. But let's just look at some of the notes that I put down here. Okay, so we know what I'm saying is a calorie is not a calorie, which is what they say, that a calorie is not a calorie. And they basically break it down in a way where they say this guy, Damon, gained weight because he was on sugar and had all kinds of health problems as a result of adding sugar to his diet. And sugar is the blame because basically he went out and he ate all of these foods from the supermarket and from restaurants. They wouldn't all be considered junk foods or unhealthy foods, but by the just the idea and the fact that they have these foods in the store and they're all processed and refined and sugar is added to everything, they're not health foods. And in addition to that, there's other things about them that are not good, like preservatives and artificial flavorings, colorings, all of these different chemicals that affect a person's chemistry in different ways. And that being said, if it was really just about the sugar, if all he did was eat foods that had sugar in them, but he also did without certain other foods, and the same thing happened to him, you could argue his case a little bit more. But one of the things that I think that is really sad that he failed to mention and that they didn't even seem to be thinking about is the idea that maybe animal foods could have a bad effect on you. And they didn't seem to even consider this at all. It seemed to be a movie that was biased in favor of eating animal foods and just wanting to demonize sugar. And as an example, just something they said that was interesting and kind of biased or super biased is that sugar that is refined, sugar that is sold in packages is something like a $50 billion a year industry, and that's why there's a lot of lies around the industry and basically scientific studies that show that it's not that dangerous. And um, Damon had said that it was because they don't want to lose their money. Yeah, that is true. Nobody wants to lose their money. No question about it. Everybody who is making money some way doesn't want to lose it. But in the United States alone, taxes paid for meat consumption alone were $83.6 billion. So $36 billion more just in taxes paid. We're not talking about the trade. $83.6 billion in taxes paid from jobs provided that were providing more than $200 billion in wages. And so we're talking straight wages that were paid to people. So that we're in the meat and poultry industry. Now, that same industry in 2014, the sales were $186 billion. So when you know that fact, you know that you could say the same thing about the meat industry. And people were saying in the movie that there's nothing wrong with just saying don't eat sugar anymore of any kind, and let's just lump everything into one category, including fruits. And let's just say that even fruit juice, which obviously is not as good for you as the whole fruit, but it doesn't really cause all these problems that people are saying it causes. And I can prove that, and I'm going to make the point here in a minute. But before I go there, they've made out sugar as the enemy. And I think it would have been better to make out animal foods as the enemy. And why not explore the whole idea of the high triglycerides, which they were saying were as a result of this diet? Maybe that's related to animal foods that he was still eating. And maybe animal foods in combination with lots of what you would call maybe junk health food, because it's not maybe classified all of the stuff he was eating as just junk food, but it was definitely not healthful food by any stretch of the imagination. And he was eating straight white sugar in cubes sometimes too. So he basically was just trying to get 40 teaspoons of sugar in his diet no matter what he did. And so he gained weight, his triglycerides went up, he had more visceral fat. The the fat that's around your belly. He gained 6 inches, I think, in his circumference of his waist. He gained 6 kilos, I believe it was, so something like 12 pounds or 13 pounds. Um, and this is all attributed and supposedly supposed to prove that sugar is bad for you. But my thought is this, and Durian Rider said something like this too. Why not look at the fruitarians? If you're really going to just say it's the fault of sugar and you're going to lump fruits in with sugar, then why not look to the fruitarian community and just say, are they experiencing high levels of triglycerides? Are they getting lots of visceral fat? And I think what you will discover is that it's the opposite. They're so skinny, they don't have any extra fat on their body. And although some of the people who are just fruitarians might not have as much muscle on their body, a lot of them are still pretty strong, but they don't have fat on their body. So you can't blame it on sugars when that's all they're eating. So just wanted to make that point. And then also to say too, you know, the whole animal thing, I'm not sure if we were really meant to eat animals or not. And people could argue that back and forth all day long. What I do know is that it feels good to not eat animals. And I feel really super good not eating animals, and I feel very healthy not eating animals. And I've been doing it for a long, long time. So I'm 45 years old almost, and I don't have any health problems. I eat a lot of carbohydrates. Now, I don't stay away from fats completely, and I don't stay away from protein completely, but for the most part, my main food groups consist of starches and sweet fruits. I mean, I probably eat more starches, and I also, like I said, I also eat some other things like beans and other grains, but those things have lots of carbohydrates in them, in spite of the fact that beans or legumes, for example, have protein and fat as well. So I do really well on eating a lot of carbohydrates, and so does my wife, and so do my kids. So um, all of us in the same family pretty much eat the same diet, with the exception of that I don't have any dairy at all, and they do have a little bit of dairy, meaning milk and cheese, which, yeah, lots of people are going to probably say, oh, why are they doing that if you're in the vegan community? I'm not doing it. I wanted to go all the way vegan, and I have, but they're not there. And there's reasons I can understand why they would argue that they're not doing that. And that's okay with me right now. It's not up to me anyway. But you don't need animal products to be healthy. And so why would somebody want to make a movie that's going to single out sugar as the enemy when they didn't even stop to eat animal products? And they don't even mention what it means to eat animal products and all the suffering that goes into it and what that might mean for people. I mean, I don't really know. There's a lot of people saying these days, like the Weston Price Foundation, and I'm going to add this too. Most of these people look really unhealthy. And they're claiming, like Sally Fallon, for example, I wrote about her many years ago when I wrote my book Health Beyond Diet Dogmas, and I was talking about how could she possibly believe that what she's teaching to people is true and good because she looks so unhealthy. And since then, that was in 2010, now in 2016, 6 years later, she still looks really unhealthy, but worse than she did before. And I see that happening among a lot of the people who are the big meat promoters. They're mostly anti-vegan, anti-vegetarian, and they're generally just so unhealthy looking and overweight. So I think that needs to be looked at. And I'm not here to put people down or to make people feel bad. I have lots of people in my family who who eat meat. I mean, I guess pretty much everybody knows lots of people who eat meat because that is the world that we live in. But You don't have to do it to be healthy. That being said, I think I'm just going to go ahead and wrap this up. That sugar film had a few important points in it. Yeah, if you thought that just eating sugar or drinking Mountain Dews or Pepsi or Coke or whatever all day long was good for you, then it probably would be an eye opener for you. But if you're already a healthy person, um, you're probably not going to learn too much from that movie. But there was one person in there. I was going to end this, but um, just for example, the person who made one of the new flavors for Dr. Pepper, they used something like 61 levels of sweetness to create the optimum level of sweetness, which creates in people like the bliss point. And so this bliss point is um, it was Doctor, or I won't say doctor. His name is Howard Moskowitz, who figured out this optimal sugar level, and now it's used in all kinds of foods, including pasta sauces, drinks, cereals, etc. So basically, the aim of most of the food businesses is to get their food to that bliss point, so they add sugar to almost everything. So if you're just eating processed foods and you're not eating whole foods, then maybe you should consider eating more whole foods. That's about the best I could give you. Eat whole foods, eat simple, and refine your diet down to very, very, very simple, good foods, and eat as much as you want of them, and you're going to still be healthy. And that's true for the most part. There are a few exceptions to that rule. You can even eat a lot of certain types of sugar, including fruit sugars and sugars that come from things like, or that come from cane, for example, but like sucanat, which still has all of the minerals in it. So, for the second time, I'm going to go now, and I'm going to see you again soon. And I would love to hear your comments. So, please let me know what you think about the movie That Sugar Film, or That Sugar Movie. I think it's called That Sugar Film. And whatever you think about what I say, I'd love to hear that too. So, please leave your comments in the comments section, and I will see you next time.